Just 9 o'clock. Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Mannix, and because of a last-minute family emergency, Richard Soul wasn't able to moderate this panel. He wasn't able to come to the conference. I work for Life Science Nation. I'm Vice President of International Business Development. And this is the Big Pharma panel. So today we have some really excellent speakers to give you some insight about Big Pharma and their involvement in early stage funding, which is the focus of the RESI conference. And I will let the speakers introduce themselves. We have Bhavani Shankar, Somjit Day, William Kuziel, and Michael Shi. So Bhavani, could you start off?
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm Bhavani Shankar with AstraZeneca, based in Boston. So my role is to engage and head up all business activities for the respiratory therapy area, starting from search and evaluation, so going out and looking for new technologies, innovative technologies, etc., bringing them into our scientific evaluation team, evaluating the technology through diligence, and then conducting the transaction as well. So quite a broad scope. AstraZeneca itself, maybe just to give a quick overview, we're focused in 3 disease areas, respiratory being a core disease area, oncology, of course, like everybody else probably on this panel, and cardiovascular, renal, and metabolic. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the panel.
Great. Somjit, could you?
Sure. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Somjit Day. I work with Otska Pharmaceuticals in Princeton office. I've been working with Otska for 5 years now, more than 5 years, and all this time I have been with BD. My role spans from scouting to negotiation and also in the deal transition phase. And just a disclaimer here, we at Otska don't identify ourselves as a big pharma company, we identify ourselves as a big venture company. So more about that maybe later, but that's what the time is. Thank you.
Okay, William?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Kuziel. I work for Daiichi Sankyo, a Japanese pharma company based in Tokyo. I'm a PhD immunologist. I had an academic career before joining Daiichi Sankyo. And at Daiichi Sankyo, for the first 9 years of my time there, I've been there 10 years. I was part of R&D in a search and evaluation function, bring in new technologies, early stage programs, set up collaborations with academic labs and biotech companies again, for new technologies and new platforms. But last April, we announced a major announcement that Daiichi Sankyo was beginning a transformation from a traditional non-oncology company to an oncology company. And so we're in the middle of that right now. And it has a lot of significance. Internal resources now directed at oncology for the most part. And so my role there now, as part of BD, that was one of the changes. My group is now part of BD. It's still search and evaluation, but a little more focused now in certain areas in oncology. And one is to develop our ADC franchise with proprietary ADC technology developed in the Tokyo labs, which is working very well in the clinic. So we are looking for partners for combination studies for our internal pipeline of candidates. And the other thing we're trying to do is develop a hem-onc franchise, starting almost from scratch, led by quizartinib, our FLT3 inhibitor, which is getting ready for, I think it's just finishing phase 3 now. And so those are the kinds of things that we're working on now and the kinds of things we're interested in now to in-license and actually out-license to the ADC technology.
Hey, Michael?
Yes, hi, I'm Michael Shi with Sanofi. We are clearly Big Pharma. I do need to say the disclaimer that any views here are not necessarily those of the company, but my own. So I work for the Genzyme business unit, heading the transactions team, and my role is really to take the handoff from our external innovation leads, who identify the assets that are of strategic interest to us, And me and my team will take that and run the business end of things, including due diligence, deal terms, and negotiating the contract, and then quarterbacking the handoff to our alliance management team. Within Genzyme, we do have a few focused areas: oncology, which is split into IO and non-IO. Non-IO being really targeted therapies, think of TKIs. Also, inflammation. We have a dermatology franchise, which has got approval in asthma for Dupixent. We've also got multiple sclerosis and neurology. And of course, Genzyme's legacy business has been in rare disease. And the last therapeutic area that we have now is rare blood disorders, which is as a result of the acquisition of BioVeritiv.
Okay, super. So I think of interest to the audience is how do you go about sourcing new technologies? I think each of you may have a little bit different approach, and I think it would be of interest to share that. How do you go about how do you start the process? Would you like to start?
Sure. I think it comes from various sources, and maybe we all have very common methodologies for that. One, of course, is meeting people like here at conferences, etc. And as with our scientific community here, we have a really large network among the academic KOLs. So if we're looking for early stage, we do look in academia as well. Other things are just cold calls, because as it gets, if you go into our AstraZeneca website and look at it on the partnering page, our pictures, our names, and our email addresses of the right person to contact for each therapy area is listed there. So we do get a lot of unsolicited, new technologies for us to evaluate as well. So we do follow, we do go through all of that. We do have a team that will actually triage each of the opportunities. Primarily, initially, it's to see for strategic fit and what the science is. Because, if you've listened to any of AstraZeneca's presentations recently, science always comes first for us, everything else comes later. So the first thing we do is look for the good science and strategic fit. If it does pass those two, then we'll take a deeper dive into it and reach out and engage with partners. The one thing I hope that the outside community sees it, we pride ourselves on responding to anyone who reaches out to us in a constructive manner, even if it is not a right fit.
That's great. And just to follow up on that, how early stage will you look at?
So we're looking at everything from novel targets. So target ID, if somebody has a novel target for one of our core therapy areas, we're extremely interested in that. Because again, if you're going to be in the forefront of science and innovation, we want something that hasn't already been published in PubMed. We want something that's novel, so very early up to, and I think what's relevant for me, for most of the people here in this conference, is we look up to phase 2. Beyond phase 2, there's a different organization that carries, because it's mostly commercial interests at that point in time. It's really not about the science. The science has been validated in humans. But we look at everything from very early stage.
Sanjeev, how does someone approach, how does Osaka discover new technologies, and what's the mechanism there?
I think Bhavani has covered most of what we do. But just to add to something to that, previously we were just a business development organization within OTSCA. And starting last year, we have added another team, which we are calling the scientific partnering team. They are an offshoot of our research institute in Japan. So both these teams go out to the early stage companies and also to academia. And what is happening here is, so the scientific partnering team being based in Japan reaches out to the academia in Japan, whereas we are reaching out to the academia in the US. So we have kind of split the geography among ourselves, and in the US we have a bigger team with more number of scouts here. So they also attend the conferences and the academia in EU as well, EU and Israel. So that's how we are trying to expand it.
So if you're in touch with academia, you're looking at very, very early stage technologies.
Yes. So but we try to focus our areas on assets that are 1 to 2 years from the IND. And we are also trying to grow our devices and diagnostics business as well. So in that case, whatever the new and upcoming technologies are, we are also focusing in that. So in academia, we have just started that, and maybe like early this year. It hasn't really picked up, but we will go, maybe starting next year.
So assets in academia potentially haven't even been spun out as companies yet, right?
Yeah.
And you're still looking into those services?
Yes.
Very good. Bill, could you continue? How does one go about doing business with entities?
So there's a variety of entry points in the company, from very early stage discovery programs in academia to almost marketed drugs. We're looking for things through the whole span of the development process. The early stage opportunities, we come to poster sessions at the scientific conferences. We have a grant program for discovery programs for individual academic labs that just went global last year. It used to be Japan only, then moved to Europe, and now it's global. We have an external portal on our website, dsi.com, so anybody can submit an opportunity through the website and through that portal, and it will come to me or one of my colleagues. I handle biologics and technologies. My colleagues cover other indications, non-oncology indications, and like pain and cardiovascular and end-stage renal disease, those kinds of things, and rare disease, which are still in scope for us, not strictly oncology. And then, yes, we just do probably what everybody else here does. And internally, there's a well-defined process that's used so that things will come to my group first. But there's also, I have colleagues in Tokyo and in Europe who do the same search and evaluation function. So if something comes in through the global head of BD, he'll send it to me. If something comes in through the portal, it'll come to me. So there's, and sometimes opportunities come in from multiple ways, through Europe, through to Tokyo, but it all gets centered in the search and evaluation function and global BD. And then we follow an internal process of evaluation and then try to respond as quickly as possible with feedback to the opportunity.
Michael, any differences?
A few. I think we do source things through all the routes that everyone else has mentioned. I think a couple of differences for Sanofi. One is our sweet spot is probably from the lead identification up to phase 2A. I think those are assets that sort of the value and the risk is sort of commensurate with where we want to go. I think post-hoc we will look at opportunistically, but those assets do tend to get very expensive. Our portfolio approach, I think, is a pretty top-down driven. By that I mean we are really looking for things that will fill a gap in our pipeline or that complement our pipeline. So we have a new head of R&D, John Reed, and John has been very clear saying he wants best-in-class, first-in-class medicines and really looking for things that can be transformative for patients and their families. I think the other part of it is thinking about portfolio management, trying to get strike a balance between big molecules and small molecules.
Okay. So I think there's, you kind of touched on this, but there's a common myth that as a fundraising company, you shouldn't reach out directly to an investor, be it a VC or a big pharma company, without having a warm introduction. I think Bhavani touched on this, that on your website you actually list the people to contact for each indication area, right? So you are open to receiving an outreach from a fundraising CEO, is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. Now, we want to find the best science there is, and we know that our time is limited. We're a small group in any company. I mean, it's limited resources. And so we look to others to bring it to our attention so that we can take a look at it.
Okay. Samjit, will you take emails from, unsolicited emails from companies that are raising money and look at those technologies?
Absolutely, and we don't even consider them unsolicited because I think we don't even have enough reach or like resources to reach out to every corner of this industry. So the best way is to, even if we get something that comes our way, that is to our advantage.
How do you make that known to a company that might be wanting to contact you? Can they find you through your website or?
Unfortunately, we are a bit primitive at that game, but we have like a common corporate contact, and they are the friends of BD. So whatever they think that it should go to BD, they come to us. So even if we don't have dedicated page for business development, if you reach out to us through our website, we will get it all the contact information.
It'll find its way to the right person.
Yes, and pretty fast.
Okay. Bill, is it easy to get in touch with you, or how does that work?
I hope so. It's as I mentioned, some of the avenues to get in touch with myself or my colleagues through the website, and again, just through meetings and through our network. But we talk to a lot of venture people and look at their portfolio companies, one by one. So it's quite a rigorous process that we have to fill gaps in our pipeline that we're trying to fill. I would like to mention that we don't really do investments. We don't have a corporate venture fund like many of my colleagues at other companies in Big Pharma. We have and we don't do equity investments when we make a deal. We've never done that, as far as I know. The only thing we have is a small investment pool of money for Japan only, and these are rare investments, even at that, and they're all very early stage academic opportunities right out of the academic sphere.
And what about an early stage company from somewhere other than Japan? What kind of deal could they do with you? Or what kind of collaboration could you enter into with a non-Japan based early stage company?
It runs the gamut. There's sponsored research projects in academic labs. There's technology agreements. We have a deal with Zymeworks where they buy specific technology. And we're always looking for other kinds of new technologies. We have a deal with Kite. It's a Japan-only deal for their CAR-T technology, so we have access to that. And that's forcing us to develop manufacturing in Japan, starting from scratch. It's for the cell processing and manufacturing. To begin the first phase 1 clinical trial there for the CD19 lead program. But it's very flexible in deal terms, and it depends on the particular situation and matter of negotiation.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Yeah, for us, I checked recently, you can find the responsible therapeutic area person. There are emails on our website, so certainly feel free to email folks. If something doesn't fit our strategy, it doesn't mean that you're out of the picture. Sanofi does have a venture arm, and so that might be a route to go depending on where you are in your fundraising. So Sanofi Ventures does make investments. I think their investment rules do not allow them to be the lead, but they can certainly be part of the syndicate. And there is also another group called Sunrise Ventures, which is part of the R&D organization, which also makes strategic R&D investments. Mm-hmm. We have also done equity as part of BD transactions, and that depends on the nature of the transaction. I think for us, equity investments are more likely to happen in areas where there's a platform technology versus a single asset or dual asset company, just because I think that gives you some downside protection in case the lead asset or whatever asset you're licensing in doesn't work out. If you believe in the science, you can hopefully get a lift on the stock price or an IPO based on some of the other assets in the portfolio.
Okay.
If I can add to what Bill and Michael said, AstraZeneca used to have a venture on MedImmune Ventures, which is now doesn't exist and has been absorbed into the AstraZeneca organization as a corporate development group. Similar to Daiichi, I think, and maybe somewhere between where Daiichi falls and Sanofi falls, we do not really make a lot of equity investments. There have been rare cases where when we felt that the platform technology was really intriguing and had a lot of potential, we have made investments, but I would say that's more the exception than the rule. The way we engage with early companies is more through research collaborations and other transactional methods rather than investment or equity positions.
I wanted to ask you, moving more to the practical side now. You're here at the Resi conference today, and you'll be meeting with some companies who want to tell you about what they're doing. What recommendations can you give to companies when they're preparing to meet with you? What do you look for? What do you like when a company sits down with you? What are you looking for in their presentation and how they present their information? Can you give any tips? Could you start, Sanjay?
Yeah, sure. Like everyone will be talking here about the science. That's a given. So apart from that, what we really want to understand is what is the IP estate that is protecting your asset. And apart from that, we would also like to know what is your specific ask? What exactly are you looking for, and why have you approached us? Is it something that you need some help in commercializing an asset, or do you want to tap to our CNS expertise? So what is your specific ask? So if we know these couple of things apart from the science, that would really help us make a case. So you can consider us as your advocates to OTSCA. So once we know the information very well, we can represent you to the company, to the BD head, and to the board. So that's the eventual what we would be looking for when we meet.
So IP and the specific ask are important. Okay. Bill, do you have anything to add on that? What do you look for when you sit down with a company? What do you like to see?
A lot of data, a lot of preclinical data, a lot of animal data if it's possible, and a real well-defined project or a well-defined target and approach that fits into what we are looking for. And I should mention that on our website there is a wish list, and I think it may be attached to the grant program, which is called Global Canvas. There's a 8-page wish list on there for oncology and non-oncology indications. It gives you an idea of what the kinds of things we're looking for, and what we're not looking for is on there as well. But intellectual property is very important. That's maybe not from up front, but eventually it becomes a limiting factor in whether we proceed or not. There's a lot of no-go decisions based on lack of enough intellectual property. But a lot of, after doing this kind of search and evaluation thing for 10 years or so, and interviewing maybe 1,000 companies or so, you get, and I have to say, almost all of them have been excellent presentations. I mean, everybody's really well prepared. There's just a few exceptions, memorable exceptions. But I have to say the community is really great in preparing for talks and presentations and pitches for, at least for me and for our group. And that goes for all the partnering conferences as well as the scientific conferences. But I hope I've given you a little bit of insight into the kinds of things we're looking for.
Michael, what do you look for?
We take a slightly different, a little bit of a different tack. I mean, of course, the science is very important, but I think for what I've seen at Sanofi so far, the business case is very, very important. At a company the size of ours, it takes a lot to move the needle, and we have to be careful where we place our investment dollars. So the business case is important to us. And I'm not saying that a biotech company has to come to us with a well-formed business case, but I think giving us the tools to do the analysis about where the differentiation is against the market, and how it fills an unmet medical need, I think is very, very important. And as I said before, John is really looking for a first-in-class, best-in-class, and to make an impact in the market. And so that's what will catch our eye.
Do you look at IP as well?
Yeah, we look at all those.
Management team?
Yeah, and that's part of the business case analysis. But at the end of the day, it's financially driven decision, and we will look at those numbers and decide whether we want to make an investment.
And Bhavani, what do you look for at a first meeting?
I
when you sit down?
think at the first meeting, of course, science is important, but also just, depending on the stage it's at, trying to understand how you've applied that science to an asset or a program. What data is available, what is the novelty around it, and to Michael's point about how does it fit into an area of unmet need. We don't want to be a me too, a repurposed drug or a conjugated something which is going to be third or fourth in class. We're looking for innovation, so we need to see where the innovation is, how it would fit into the AstraZeneca portfolio. There is a lot of information out there as to what we're looking for, similar to some of my other colleagues here at the panel. So I would say do your homework a little bit, see how you would fit in. And if you can bring to us saying, we've seen your website, this is how we fit into your portfolio. I think you're selling it to me, and in turn I can take that and sell it internally, rather than me having to do the homework as to how it fits into our portfolio. If you can bring that to me, the story. Just to give an example, I get an average of about 50 opportunities a week on a busy week. So, there's only so much time, me and my team can spend on it. So if you can help me help you, I think that's what I would be looking for in the initial conversation.
Okay, very good. What about timing after this initial meeting? So, say you meet with a company here today that you think fits your strategic needs. You like what you see in this initial meeting. What happens after that? And if the project continues through your pipeline, what kind of timing are we looking at until a deal is actually proposed? Until you send out perhaps a term sheet. What kind of timing are we looking at?
That's a bit of a tough question because there are a lot of factors that go into it. But just maybe from a process point of view, if I meet with somebody today, take it back. I don't make the decision on my own. I have an external innovation team, which is my scientific counterpart, with whom we discuss. We're a group of 5 who review it, decide whether it fits into our portfolio. As I mentioned previously, our first triage is it good science, is it innovative and novel, and does it fit into our portfolio and the gaps in our pipeline? If it does meet all these criteria, typically we try to come back to people within a couple of weeks to tell them at least, yes, we're interested, how much information can you share with us on these areas, which is basically questions about the gaps that we see in the presentation. And granted, it's a non-confidential presentation, so there will be gaps. So that's the point you decide if we're interested enough to get into a confidential CDA and engage further with the scientific team to actually delve into the science. If it is interesting enough, our approval process has actually improved tremendously, and most of the bureaucracy has been taken away. If it is something that we're really interested in and we can find an internal champion to take it forward and fits into our pipeline, things move fairly quickly. There's no big committees that sit and decide it. We take it to the TA leadership team, which is a group of 5 people that actually define the portfolio for each of the TAs. If they approve it, then me as a transaction person can put out a data sheet. So I would say it depends. If it is something we're really highly interested in and we want to grab it before somebody else, it could be within a month or 2. If it is something that doesn't fit into that, we really absolutely have to have it category, it could take a little longer. But generally, we try to be as responsive as possible. We know your time is just as valuable as our time, so we don't drag you along if there is no interest. Try to be very open and honest with you as to where the gaps are. And if we think there's potential down the road because it's a bit too early for us, we will tell you that as well.
So it can go very quickly if
we have a
everything falls
serious
into place.
interest.
Okay, that's great. Is it the same for you, Sanjeev?
Pretty much same, but there are a couple of things I would just like to highlight here. So if you don't hear from us within 2 weeks, just follow up. That's a very important thing, that we might have missed something, or we might not have been doing our own work very well within the department. So just follow up with us. If there is a timeline that you are looking for, that what is your expectation of receiving an LOI or a term sheet, let us know upfront. If we need to prioritize a project, we will. Even though we are split across the globe, like we have a big business development presence in the US and in Japan and in EU, we still, if we can prioritize a project, we can really move fast. So, like from the first meeting to an LOI or a term sheet can take anything between 4 to 8 weeks, depending on our interest and what kind of information exchange we have.
Okay. And after an LOI term sheet, then it really depends on both parties, right? How long it takes to move something forward?
Yeah, it certainly does. So we have completed deals within 4.5 months, starting from the first meeting to the deal closing date, and even it has taken about 7.5 months on the other end. So
Okay.
it can be on both either side of the project.
Okay, great. Bill, what does the timing look like for a company that you meet today, for example?
I think Daiichi Sankyo is representative of all Japanese big pharma in that there is no fast tracking. You would have a lot of patience, right? That's the key word, is have a lot of patience. It's highly bureaucratic. There's a strict process to follow. And as I said before, even if something comes in through global head of BD, it's going to enter the process. And that is, the evaluation involves the research groups in Tokyo, and most of our research groups are in Tokyo. So there's a lot of communication between myself and that group, and trying to get feedback from them. Which we like to provide feedback as soon as we can to any opportunity. If something's clearly out of scope, we'll let them know right away. We'll let you know right away. But there is a process. Some deals have taken years. Zymeworks is an example of that, many years actually. But finally, it was done. And then once it's done, it was enhanced, expanded. So things can happen, but patience is the key word. There's a non-confidential evaluation of information leading to a confidential evaluation, teleconferences involving the research group in Tokyo, more evaluation, and so on. So there's, the patience is the word.
Michael, what does timing look like for you?
Yeah, I think if you look up the word bureaucracy, I think it originated from the French. So, what I will say is there's a fair amount of governance committees, although now we're trying to shrink those down. So I think it boils down to two aspects. One, there's a set of scientific governance committees, and then there's a business governance committee. Non-binding term sheets do not go out without sign-off from what we call the transactions committee, which is headed by the head of Global BD. If it goes above a certain dollar amount for the upfront, then it will go to the CFO for sign-off for a non-binding offer. What I can tell you is that while it may take a while, and it can take 2 to 3 months to get a term sheet out the door, you do know that with Insanity, there's a lot of alignment behind those numbers. So they're not just straw men, but they're very serious. It's a very serious offer, even though it's non-binding. And that's part of the reason for the robust interrogation of these assets before we even do due diligence. I mean, there's a lot of pre-work that we do internally before we send out an offer, including a lot of work with literature. We'll do a lot of work on the commercial side in terms of TPPs, even perhaps in some cases generating top line and building out a model even before an MBO goes out the door. So it's a little slow, but it hopefully speeds things up at the end, because we hope then that diligence is more confirmatory. we have a range of numbers that management has signed off on, so ultimately when it goes back for final signature approval, which gets through the executive committee in Paris, it should go quicker than that.
So how many months are we talking about? From an initial meeting?
I'd say 4 to 6, so the deal we just did with Denali took over a year.
I'd like to add, after a big meeting like a bio or a JP Morgan, things really slow down, right? Because there's a lot to process. There's a lot of, and we flood the research groups in Tokyo for evaluations, and so there's certainly a lag, extra lag caused by that. So depending on what time of year the opportunity comes in, you can run up against that extra delay.
And I want to ask just one last question of you all before turning the Q&A session over to the audience. What's a red flag for you? What would be a red flag when you sit down with the company and that you think this is something that I would not move forward to the next steps because of this?
A lot of times what we will do is we'll ask for an NTA to try to replicate one of the key preclinical experiments. And if we can't replicate it, that's clearly a red flag for us.
Okay. Mike, I'm sorry, Bill?
Yes, that's something we do as well, MTAs, to try to replicate the results. Other things, lack of differentiation from similar types of technologies or opportunities. The target is well covered, unless there's some really novel approach. And of course, lack of solid IP. So these kind of things.
So, Greg, we go to the negotiation table only after we have checked all these things. But when we are at the negotiation table, we would appreciate as much transparency as possible. If you have a bad news, share that with us. Even that stops the deal at that point in time. The relationship would be good, and we will maintain that relationship, and we will nurture that relationship if we see that transparency and truthfulness. And you never know that after a year or maybe 18 months, if you can remedy that problem, we will be there at the negotiation table. But never hide that bad news from us. Please share that if there is.
Okay, good advice. Amani?
I think, similar to what my colleague said, of course, sometimes we do tend to evaluate things under an MTA to make sure that we can replicate, that gives us a lot more confidence. I think the other thing, and I'll give you an example, there was this one company we were talking to in a collaboration on an early platform technology. They had a lead asset, but they wouldn't share with us what the target was until we submitted the term sheet, even under a CDA. And that raised a red flag for us because, again, we're looking to collaborate with them. We're just not taking their asset, licensing their asset. And that speaks volumes to the kind of relationship, the lack of transparency. That's a real red flag because we value our partners, we value the relationships with our partners. The last thing we want to do is start off on a bad foot. That's only going to go downhill. We know that's not the key to a successful partnership. So we actually, even though we liked the data we saw, we walked away from that.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. So we have a few more minutes. Let's open questions up to the floor.
Yeah, so I would like to ask what your reaction is to these supposed build to buy type structures that a lot of venture capitalists talk about, where they come and find somebody who likes the deal, the venture capitalists will fund the development under the agreement that you guys would acquire it if things succeed. Could you give your reaction to those kind of deals?
Yeah, we're definitely open to that kind of structure. I think it depends again, but valuation is valuation, and all the boxes do need to be checked off. So if that's the proposed structure, we're happy to build to buy.
And is that the same sort of time scale as you guys were talking about, or is that a lengthier process to build to buy?
I think it could be the same, for us at least, it could be the same time frame. Some of it depends on sort of what the company is, and the cap structure, and what buy-in needs to be done. I mean, if you have a single investor, it makes things a lot easier. But if you've got like a syndicate of 3 or 4, you're ability to build it by them, sometimes it gets a little more complex.
We have that kind of program in Japan only, not in the US. Take a really early stage asset out of academia, invest with some others. Mitsubishi Bank is part of this group. And it's to take that potential asset to a certain level where then we can acquire it or start a company around that asset, but only in Japan.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we don't have a formal build to buy program per se, but to Bill's point, with the very early stage assets, where there is a lot of gaps and there's a lot of risk that we would be taking on, we like to work with the academic or with the company to bring it to a point where we have de-risked it a little bit and then acquire it or license it as the case may be. So we tend to do more of that, more informally, and we do keep in touch with most of the VCs as well, of course, to understand what their portfolio looks like and where our interests might be, and very candidly tell them, these are the companies that we may be interested in if they get to a certain point. So we're monitoring it, but we're not formalizing it in any way.
How much time do you spend looking at innovation coming in that's new versus innovation that's coming in that can defend existing franchises or line extensions within for a current product?
So with me and my colleagues who look at the early stage, innovation is key. So we don't spend a lot of time looking at the latter, which is a defensive mechanism, or line extension, life cycle management kind of techniques. That the late stage tends to look at things like that more. We do look at truly innovative science, something that's going to enhance our portfolio 5-7 years down the road.
Yeah, I think we're the same way. We tend to spend more time on the innovative things and line extensions, although we do have a technology platforms team that looks across platforms to see if there's something that could be applicable to Sanofi on a company-wide basis for one or more GBUs.
I would maybe just to add to the one exception, of course, is in oncology, where we're looking for combinations. So that there it might be, the innovation is in the combination, but the drugs itself may be further advanced drugs or even commercialized drugs.
I can say a little bit more about that. As I mentioned, we have the ADC technology, and we're building a pipeline of ADC candidates. And we're looking for collaboration, combination partners, especially IO combination partners. Our lead is a HER2 ADC, as I mentioned, working very well in the clinic so far, followed by a HER3 ADC in the clinic, but these are good candidates for combination of various IO approaches.
All of you, sounds like all of you want to replicate the result as part of your decision-making process. How can you replicate some result? Some experiment may take a month or years to replicate. How can you do that?
Well, no, of course, we're not going to replicate something that's chronic, that's going to take months or years, right?
Right.
We do have, I think the confidence for us comes from when we replicate it internally, when we have our own assays set up, we validated it, we know how robust those assays are or how reliable those assays are, replicating in there. But at least from the AstraZeneca perspective, I'd say we usually replicate 1 or 2 key experiments, which are mostly acute, that we've set up. It could be even in vitro assays, but that's where we would stop. We wouldn't be doing a chronic 9 months study in some kind of aged animals if it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
No, that's not
Some key
what.
experiment, maybe in vivo animal experiment.
Right.
To replicate those, it's time and effort.
Sometimes, but if that gives us the confidence to move forward and increases our confidence in it, that's going to reflect on the term sheet. So I think sometimes it's a necessary step, even though it may slow down the actual business negotiations.
Sanjeev, do you have anything to add?
No, I think she described it pretty well, so nothing to add there.
Anyone?
It could be longer or shorter. It depends on the experiments that have to be done. when we're looking for partners for our ADC technology, if somebody has an antibody, a company has an interesting antibody that could be used with our ADC linker payload technology. So before we do the deal, we make the conjugate and test it in vitro and in vivo. First, to make sure the technology is compatible with the antibody, and then that whole process can take 6 to 9 months. But it's at the end of that, then you have good data, a good indication about whether that's going to is worthwhile to continue.
Can you comment on any of the companies that are up there, the venture arms that you may have that might invest in companies and how that would work and how you work with your venture arms?
Yeah, for us, we have separate Sanofi Ventures arm. They make their own decisions. They do look strategically to invest in companies that are in therapeutic areas at least aligned with where Sanofi is or is going. So we can certainly make an introduction to that group. It's headed by a guy named Bernard Davidian, who sits in Cambridge. And so also we have another group, Sunrise Ventures, which is reports into John Reed's group, and that's headed by Kathy Bodish. I think you can find their information on the Sanofi website, but they'll make their own investment decisions, and they tend to do companies that are either Series A or B, I think, and of course, as I said before, they won't necessarily be the lead investor, but they'll happily join syndicate.
At Otska, we do not have a venture arm, but we never say never. So if you have a specific ask, please reach out to us. We will figure out a way how to work with you. Even if it's like you are looking for an investment series A, series B, we can work around that. And we have made a couple of investments through some venture capitalists last year. So we are developing that. So we're open to it.
At Daiichi Sankyo, we don't have a venture arm, and rarely, if ever, make equity investments.
I think AstraZeneca, we fall somewhere in the middle. We've dissolved our venture arm, MedImmune Ventures, but we've kind of absorbed it into the organization as a corporate development group. But I would say that that's a small group. We make very select equity investments, typically when there is a strategic interest and a strategic fit and mostly of platforms and platform companies, not single asset companies. But we do work very closely with them, and if you have an ask, if you reach out to me, I can send it over to our corporate development group, because they do rely on us from the therapy areas to do the scientific evaluation at the end of the day and the strategic fit to our portfolios.
Yeah, I know most of you from the in-licensing side. Can you share some information about your out-licensing? How do you do that? How to connect with your out-licensing team?
We don't very actively externalizing things that don't belong in our portfolio or don't quite fit into our portfolio. And one of the things since Pascal Soriot came on as CEO in 2012, one of his mandates has been that if it has potential, it could help patients, and if it doesn't fit in our portfolio, we are obligated to find somebody for whom it is a good fit. So I can tell you over the last 2 years, I have externalized about 7 different early clinical assets. So we're very actively engaged in it. We don't have a separate externalization group. The therapy area leads externalized assets that we are not taking into our portfolio. So again, go into our partnering page, you'll see different people, myself for respiratory, Kai Brickman for CVRM, and Maria for oncology. And similarly on the antibody side, you will see people from different therapy areas. The emails are there, reach out to them. And to what Som said before, if we don't respond, it's not because we're not engaged. Sometimes things do fall through the cracks, so we're tied up in other priorities. Just, prod us, give us a reminder, and we'll come back to you.
Important message there, always follow up. Exactly.
Yeah, we actually have a dedicated licensing group. The email on the website, it's mainly Matthew Lebrun. He's based out of Paris, and I think the way we do it is we just have a deprioritization list. It's generally early stage assets, and those will be externalized.
Well, I think we've run out of time. Thank you for coming today, and yeah, the next session starts at 10 o'clock.